Wow. What a magnificent movie. Well, how's it look 40 years later?
We're sharing. Can you see he played my husband? It was the beginning of a long
We
friendship.
guys quit bickering.
What do I do next, darling?
So, how does it look 40 years later?
You know, it's always difficult to watch movies you made a long time ago because some people have passed, crew people as well as actors. Yeah. So you know, some of the people who are in the movie and a lot of the people who worked on the movie are gone now, and so you watch it in a different way. But you still get caught up in the characters, and you're very proud of the work people did, and sometimes you can remember the day that you shot that scene and what the situation were, and whether you shot it in the morning or the night, or what the light was like, or we had to do the reverse angle like a football field away because the background wasn't any good. And so having made the movie and edited it with worked with an editor on it, you've seen things so many times that you don't forget a lot about the making of.
Yeah.
So, but it's always nice to just kind of get caught up in the movie and what's going to happen next?
Yeah. Were you surprised by the ending?
I hope not.
Oh, sure. To my left, Chris Cooper played Joe Kenahan.
John Sayles.
David Strathairn, Gordon Clapp,
Joe Grifasi.
Maggie Renzi.
Let's just check. There's no one else here who worked on the film, is there? People slipped in. Mason Daring was here earlier. Carolyn, yeah. Oh, Carolyn, would you stand?
She worked in some of our films.
You worked in a bunch of John's films, and you did a lot to make tonight happen. Everybody, Carolyn Brooks.
Yeah.
Rich, I think Martin Brody is here. Are you? And Martin, you played on this, did you?
No, actually no.
Not this one. Lots of other ones. Yeah.
All right, let's
Mason
watch The
left?
Stolen Valor then, Martin. John, you've, I think, very helpfully once broke down films into three elements of narrative, acting, and picture. That's a great way of looking at it. Let's take the narrative first. You first encountered this story when you were hitchhiking through West Virginia.
Yeah, I hitchhiked a lot in the late 60s and early 70s, and this is history I'd never heard of before. There was, the UMW was going through this very traumatic reform election thing between the reform candidate, Jock Yablonsky, and a guy named Tough Tony Boyle, who was the head of the UMW then, which ended with Tony Boyle having Jock Yablonsky, his wife and daughter, murdered on Christmas Eve.
Sentimentalist.
So, but this was before that murder had happened, and I kept getting rides in Kentucky and West Virginia from coal miners. And they say, "Oh, buddy, we got a lot of contention right now. We got this election thing going, and people are punching each other out. We're going to have another Matewan massacre." And it's like, "Oh, what was that?" And like most people, I didn't know. We were living in Hoboken, near Matewan, New Jersey, so I thought it would have been pronounced Matewan. And then when I figured out what it was, I started looking, and there really wasn't that much information about it. And there was like one book that really mentioned it. And then a lot of the sources at the time were either newspapers that were owned by William Randolph Hearst or other kind of major capitalists that were saying, oh, these are a bunch of red anarchists and stuff like that. Or they were the UMW Journal, which had its own very kind of narrow focus. We're right and they're all bad guys. So it took a lot of research to get it. And as the more I learned about it, I felt like, first of all, this is history people should know in America. And there are so few movies about labor history in American labor history. And secondly, this is something Americans are used to. This is like a Western. This ends up with a showdown on Main Street, at high noon. And it has the form of a gunfight Western where there are these increasing encounters, until well, these guys are going to have to face off at the end of the picture.
And Maggie, when did you come into the story?
Oh, I didn't hear your question.
When did you come onto the story?
Well, John said, let's go learn more about this. And so we went down to West Virginia to the archive where we
Because there really was no historical monograph on
There
this.
was
You
no-
guys really had to write the story.
There was really no information about it.
And
It
make a
occurs
film.
to me, we were talking a little bit before about this movie, and I didn't actually watch all of it because I've seen it pretty many times just recently. We were so ambitious. We were like 35 years old, I think, when we made this, And sometimes I'm grumpy about movies that young people make now because I don't think they're ambitious enough, I'm glad this movie isn't about us, or our...
Like our first movie was.
Yeah, like our first movie was. Fair enough, like
We've
our
done
first
that.
movie
Got that
was.
out of your system.
Yeah, by the time we get beyond Secaucus 7, we're starting making movies about people who are not us.
And David, you look really good in a starched high collar. and you can deliver a line like, either of you shithogs lift a finger in the town limits, I'll bury you.
I know, I was counting who had the most pithy lines in the movie, and it's the toss-up between me and Griggsy here.
You guys can terse it off later. Thus begins the complexity of the character that is Sid Hatfield. How did you go about creating that character of great understatement?
Basically, what people talked about, what they said, what John had them saying about him, that he had a little bit of history in the war, and he came back, and before that, he was considered Smiling Sid. He was, a good local guy, and he comes back from the war, and things have changed, and he didn't have too many smiles. So I kind of went with that, and also the fact that he looked out for his own. Mm-hmm. That's all I needed to know. To look out for my people.
And he was a Hatfield.
And I was a Hatfield.
Yeah, and they looked out for their own.
An enormously
sort of
complicated story. Yeah.
There's folklore about the Hatfields and the McCoys and a pig or two, a hog or two. But I didn't think that was apropos that we even touched on that. It was more important that he was of the people, and that's the only thing I needed to do.
Yeah.
I write bios for the characters, and so all the actors got a biography of their character, which is stuff that's not necessarily in the script. But I'd worked with David in theater and movies before, and in the earlier movies, I would sometimes be in them, and he's the only other actor I ever act behind me. Because it was before video assist, so it was going to be 2 days until I saw what he did, and I always just felt, man, I'm going to just see what Dave's going to do. So the first scene that David was in was the one where him and Chris's characters meet, and he kind of says, watch your step.
Yeah.
Whoever you are, watch your step. And it was great. I don't think I gave you a note, maybe 2 notes the rest of the movie, which is,
It's really easy to act behind John because you can't see me.
Yeah.
And I understand you're also the only actor who can tolerate chewing tobacco, right, without throwing.
I can't. When we made 8 Men Out, all the actors started chewing tobacco, and you could tell some of them were just trying to man up in front of the other guys and just. looking very good. But their favorite thing was one scene was a dugout conversation, and to get enough light, because they're all wearing baseball hats, and it takes the light out of your face. So we had to have a big, it's called a white card in front of them, where you bounce light off into their faces. And so, of course, they just practiced doing Rorschach blots with that. So that was the last time that white card was white.
Didn't use that one again, huh? Gordon, when you pull the gun on Danny at the dinner table, I think that's one of the great shocking moments of moviedom.
Well, John wrote me a letter. It was his way of directing before we got to the set. He would write these letters, and it was just basically giving us a reason to exist. And defending our point of view, giving us giving the character a reason to believe in himself. And I just remember thinking of Griggsy as a victim of this terrible system of government that was that we were threatened by, and Griggsy had lost a lot of friends in these wars. So that was where I started.
Yeah.
I also told him and Kevin Tighe, and people still say, those bad guys are like really exaggerated. The Baldwin Felts Agency used to intercept Red Cross milk before it got to the starving children in that camp and put kerosene in it and then put it back on the, so it was like, these are not guys who, have a whole lot of breaks when it comes to, they've been given this job to make these people's lives miserable, and they're going to do it.
Yeah, they were, yeah.
Baldwin Ice.
Yeah. Chris, this was your first movie, right? You'd acted on the stage for a while, but this was your first film?
It was my first film, other than little short NYU films from another good friend that first worked with my wife, Nancy Savoca, and Nancy and Rich have since worked with just about all of us. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it was the first film I had done, was pretty content doing stage work. And thank God.
Turned out to be a good move for you.
Well, my wife over the years kept nudging me, and the agents, the agents that I was working with said, "Get on with it, let's do some film or TV," and so it was a great start. It was, I say to this day, and you've already said it, it's a piece of American history that very few of us know about. And I just couldn't be more proud, for a first film, unheard of, just unbelievable.
Chris was also, we auditioned people for the movie, offered some people jobs, and then the people who were promising us the money to make the movie said, "Oh, that bank loan we were going to get to give you to make the movie? It didn't come through." And we were like, a day from flying down to West Virginia to start the pre-production. So a couple of years went by, and then we scraped together. Everything was more expensive, so we scraped to more money than we originally thought we could make it together. And we had the audition process again. And the first time around, the very first actor to come in was Chris Cooper. We had a list of, we were seeing like 8 to 10 guys a day, and some of them were even known actors at the time to play this lead part. And by the end of that process, we were kind of, saying, well, that first guy was, but, that was a long time ago. Even at the end of the first day, you kind of forget, oh yeah, that first guy was good. So when we went back, one actress that we had hired had died in a car crash, so we had to recast that movie. All the kids that we saw, none of them were incredible, but they were all too old by now. So we said, well, we should see that first guy again. And so Chris was in the theater in England.
In the UK,
Yeah.
working with, of all people, imagine this, Harold Pinter directing Tennessee Williams with Lauren Bacall.
Yeah,
Pretty cool, pretty cool.
yeah. And we didn't know that Chris was coming all that way. So, and once again, he was the first guy that we saw. And did you read with some actresses?
I think I read with Mary. You
With
were
Mary
bringing
McDonald.
all the women back.
Yeah,
to-
yeah. And there were like 5 women that we were looking at for that party. And what I do remember is, because, Maggie's been an actress and everything, we had our separate scorecards, as actors came in, and we would, look at each other's notes. And I said, that first guy again, this generic name, I couldn't remember. That first guy. Remember, he was the first guy the last time, too. He was really good. And she said, I don't know, did he smile once? And I said, no, but, I'll look at the script. And I came back to her and I said, I don't think the character smiles in the movie. Or if he does, we could teach him probably. And so I don't think this would ever happen together. Even in an independent movie, we had other people's money. It was not our own money, or not all our own money. I had some money in it. They said, sure. No, they
didn't
weren't.
know he couldn't
They didn't say
smile.
go back and get a name or anything like that. And that was a very rare thing even then. But now it would be just pretty much impossible.
Yeah, well, chose wisely.
Yeah.
Joe, I understand you have a bunch of good stories. Want to tell us one?
Posso parlare, amore?
Yeah.
Sì? Mi permetti? Grazie. I always got to check, Well, the thing I was thinking of was not so much in the filming, which every day was a pleasure, was how we ended up really embedded in that community. I remember arriving at, it was just getting dark, and I got off a plane, and then they took me in a car and got off at a clover leaf, and I go, where are we going? And I drove in. We got off the Cloverleaf and literally made a right turn, and I look up and we're in an Econo Lodge. And I said, this is going to be the most desperate 8 weeks of my career. And it was the opposite, of course.
Spend a night, not a fortune.
Yeah, exactly. Spend a night, not a fortune. Spend a night, not a fortune, yeah.
And then there was the Ponderosa Steakhouse.
Oh, God. And then Pasquale's Italian restaurant. He was the one Italian restaurant in town and the one Chinese restaurant. They got all of our business, of course, but because we were all desperate for something else. But the community embraced us a lot. And I think what happened was because John was, and the designers and everybody was doing such a great job of verisimilitude and recalling the period, that I felt that a lot of them whose parents and grandparents were part of this whole thing, they were all rejuvenated a little bit by it. It was the community consciousness seemed to be reawakened and purged. So they talked to us like we were doing something good for their, for their own personal history. And and what it meant to the community was not a big budget film, but the economy was changed in Beckley, West Virginia. I remember several people who had benefited from the designers going picking, retired from business after we left town. They said, no, we're good now. You guys put us over the top, And it was just, and the scene that always gets me is the one about the musicians in the 3 different hollows playing and musically, because that was true. I remember one resident said, there was a big bridge there called the New River Bridge. It had a giant gorge in the middle, and it's become famous now because people jump off it with parachutes and bungee cords. But she said to us, until that bridge came, we were always told the people on the other side were different. They had horns and funny faces, and we're almost different species, you know what I mean? And we didn't know anything. And the hollows were like that. They kind of kept people apart in the old days, and I don't know. It just felt good every time we encountered some of that. Those were real local preachers around town, and some of us, well, not me, but David, I think, and some people started to go to church, and they got born again. So,
Had you ever worked with James Earl before?
never, but that was a delightful experience. I knew him socially, and he was such a company actor. He was a great guy. I remember going shopping with him one day at Kmart, and there was a well, you know, it wasn't like there
Take a
was
second
a
to picture
Bonwit
that.
Teller in Beckley, West Virginia, you know. There was in the next town. And he said, he looked, we were watching, and there was a young black father with his son walking. And he said, you know, something I've noticed about this community, he said, there's not a lot of black people here. He said, but I've noticed a lot of black men are with their children. He said, that makes me feel good. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I remember one time when we were shooting The Encampment, and we couldn't get David Strathairn because camera was set, we were ready to roll, and couldn't find him. And finally, someone brought him back. He said, "Oh, he went chasing some wild turkeys into the woods." You remember? He got Nature Boy. It was the original Nature Boy. But anyway, there are some good stories, but I don't want to.
Is it known, David, that you're quite a good taxidermist, right?
A good taxidermist,
Aren't
Dave?
Good taxidermist?
Isn't it? You did that owl at Carolyn's house? Am I extrapolating too much?
Yeah, one owl. Come on.
All right, maybe not. I strike the question. Let me try a different question. One of the things I'm really struck with watching the film again is that it's so good in large measure because of the work of Haskell Wexler, the director of photography. Can each or some of you speak to what it was like to work with him and what he did with you?
I'm gonna start this. This is my first feature film. So damn excited every day. I was looking over Haskell's shoulder, in scenes that I wasn't nearly involved in, but asking him, God bless him, asking him 1,000 questions about how to work with a camera, where to look, Mm-hmm. And he was telling me stories about different actors he worked with, and he's worked with the best of the best. And here I am, this first time, film actor, just probably driving him crazy, asking the most silly questions, but he was always there,
Mm-hmm. He, Haskell, I had talked to him on the phone once about a totally different thing, and Maggie and I were driving down to West Virginia, and she was reading this really nice book called Masters of Light, which was about cinematographers, and one chapter was talking to Haskell Wexler. And he's a very political guy, and at some point Maggie just said, we should work with this guy. He should shoot Matewan. And I think, well, I could try. I talked to him on the phone once. And so we put in a call to his agent, and we got back to the Econo Lodge one day. And what was her name who worked at the desk?
Miss Betty.
Miss Betty. And Miss Betty said, well, somebody named Hacksaw Wexler he was calling from his car. And that was very new, that you could call from your car. And he just said, whatever those people want, my answer is yes. Yeah. And I'm the only director who really ever worked with Haskell 4 times.
Yeah.
I think Norma Jewison worked with him maybe 2 or 3. But he was very opinionated, not about the light so much, about what the movie was about. And so he would start telling the director, why would he say that? Or, what's going to... And directors don't like that. But at one point, in the strike scene, when the the black miners and the Italian miners come up and they throw their things down and they walk down. And the Italians start singing Bandera Rosa, which was a communist work song. And he just turned to me and said, "I'm the only cinematographer in Hollywood who knows what those lyrics mean." And he, just luckily for us, because we really did not have that much time and that much money, his speed to skill ratio was incredible. So I could say, "Haskell, we have a half an hour, make it look as good as you can." And then every once in a while he'd come to me and say, Could I have a little more time on this one, because it could be really great. And I kind of look at the schedule and I say, "Okay." And just, he'd tell me when it was ready. My favorite shot in the movie, I don't know, this is not the ideal way to look at it, but the shot where David's character, Sid Hatfield, the night before the shootout, is just sitting there as a little half circle around him as he's, getting his gun ready, and he thinks he's going to die tomorrow. But the lighting is just so beautiful, and then Mason Daron's music under it. I don't know if you watch the credits. The first musician who comes up is John Hammond, who died this year, and we had another guy named Phil Wiggins from Detroit, who had done a lot of the specific cues. And then Mason kind of knew John Hammond from gigging with him somewhere, and he said, "Can you come in and do some fill-in stuff?" And we had some very specific stuff for him to do. And then he said, "That was a really cool movie. Can I do more?" And we just said, "Okay. We're going to give you a microphone." He had his whole kit, of different keys of harmonicas out in front of him. And he just watched the movie with a headset, and every once in a while he'd pick it up and he'd play. And we used half of that stuff. Mm-hmm. So that was just him reacting to the music movie.
Beautiful, beautiful. I'm not sure if this happened on Matewan or a different film, but Jace Alexander, who you've used in a number of your films, you told the casting director you wanted Jace Alexander, and
the other one came
Jason
in.
Alexander.
Yeah,
from Seinfeld.
This is this is one of those things. Actors, I hate to say, are they're eternally optimistic, and they never miss a chance. So you have to ride a horse. Oh, I've been on a horse. I was born on a horse, actually. My father was a centaur, so we Jace had been kind of an extra and did a few things on this movie, Baby It's You, I read. And I remember he was a really kind of sharp kid, and I bet he'd be a pretty good actor if you give him lines, And so the casting person comes in and says, "Well, Jason's in the next room, and he's really excited to see you again." And this guy comes in, and it's Jason Alexander from Seinfeld, and he says, "Hey, John, how you doing?" And I'm saying, that's not Jace Alexander. And I let him play the whole thing out, which was a better performance than the reading he did. And then we tracked down the real Jace Alexander.
I'm glad it worked out the way it did.
Yeah,
but
for
a part
both
of
of
me
us.
would really like to see what the movie would have been.
Yeah.
With George Costanza. So let's have a few questions from the audience before we break. Does anybody have a question? Just shout it. I can't. In the white shirt in the back.
I think the one character in the film, and this goes to your DP, was the darkness. How you guys filmed in such a dark canvas, and how you made that work.
Can I
Okay.
can I answer you by telling you that the projection was not very good? It is very dark, and Haskell is a master of darkness. And the next time you see the movie, you'll see that there's less darkness. It's not as contrasty. It doesn't completely disappear from the faces. So you're exactly looking for the right, his genius, only there's too much of it in this projection today.
Yeah.
Haskell told me, and whether maybe you told me or something like this, he took this challenge on, and there was a moment where I remember him saying, "So I'll be shooting in a coal mine, and I'll be trying to shoot African Americans in a coal mine." Okay.
And the light is going to come from a mirror with one flame in front of it. We had 8 candle power on that shot at the very beginning.
And that was gas, not electric.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, somebody else?
I've got a question.
Yeah.
And it really relates to this film so fabulous. I haven't seen it in so many years. When you think about what this film does and what it says and where we are now, did you draw any parallels to what's going on?
Well, you know, things have changed, obviously, but this film was one of the reasons I thought it was important to make this film is this is made during the Reagan years. The first thing that Ronald Reagan did was bust the Air Traffic Controllers Union, just to do it. You know, he didn't really care about that, but it was something his advisors said, you got to show them that, those glory days for those guys are up. Most of what they were asking for was a reduction in hours so it would be safer for people in airplanes. Almost all of them lost their jobs, and within a year, they'd been replaced by other people who had gotten everything that they were asking for. So it was just a show. So I wanted to, make something that reminded people of why we have unions and just how hard it was to get them in. And this was a failure. I mean, as the kid says at the end, basically, they busted the union. And until Franklin Roosevelt came in, they did not come back because he helped make it legal to have unions in all states in the, there just aren't as many union jobs, partly because we're not using coal that much. We're not mining, iron ore. Those jobs where the company has to be there because the thing that they're making or mining or whatever is there. We don't have that many of those anymore, and so we have more of a service comment. And that it's really hard to unionize when they can just say, oh, you want a union? We'll close that store. There's plenty of Walmarts around. You're not gonna hurt us and start this cancer of unionism. So specifically in terms of workers, it's even worse than it was then as far as getting any kind of rights. And people get desperate. That's always been the tactic, is to make people so worried about, if I lose my job, will I ever get another one again? That they're afraid to organize.
And the rest of what we're seeing, of course, is an effort to bury the history that we actually have managed to excavate. But let's remember that we have excavated it, and that I think it's going to turn out to be harder to shove all that back in the box because of how much we know. Read Rebecca Solnit right now, her new book. It's really a good book reminding us how far we've come and therefore how important it is to consider this a beginning. I mean, this movie was shown regularly in Rhinebeck, New York, in the public school system in the 12th grade history class or whatever it was,
Yeah.
And
Union
that's all we can do,
organizers
right?
use it.
I did think there might be more movies kind of like this since we made it, but there haven't been, and that's a disappointment.
Say I was a teacher in Guilderland, New York, and we also used it faithfully.
Thank you, girl.
I know there are a few of you here. If you were a teacher who used Matewan, would you just raise your hand?
Yay.
Wow, look at that. That's something.
And I think it's interesting
You're a
that
teacher. Just make one.
a couple years back, there was a wildcat strike of teachers in West Virginia. The union told them, we can't support you because we will literally go to jail if there is a strike. The laws have changed in their favor so much. But if you're going to wildcat, we're not going to complain. So in that very conservative state, things were bad enough for teachers that they went back and went on strike.
Yeah.
Many of the teacher strikers, because my daughter was involved in that, were the sons and daughters of the Miners for Democracy.
Yeah, absolutely. Which was a reform group within the UMW.
A really cool thing happened. So when we didn't shoot in Matewan, right, we shot in a town called Thurmont that's not far from Beckley, which is a big city. And we couldn't shoot in Matewan partly because it was actually quite difficult to get there. You fly people in and then have to go all the way across the state. But also because it was still very dark there. People didn't really want to talk about this history. It was didn't feel like a safe place to tell the story. Just let me just quickly finish, darling. And now there is a wonderful museum in the town of Matewan that's called the
Mine Wars
Museum, which John and I have visited, and I really encourage you to look it up and to support them. It's really a good example, I think, of a movie planting seeds. When people saw this movie, it gave them courage to talk about this dark story that they had, and eventually to have a wonderful museum and a really active, lively history program that West Virginia schools are invited to share in. And so you teachers, check it out.
Yeah, there was Thurman had been a big railroad town because coal went through there, and there's a lot of money in coal. And one of the big buildings you see on that main street was a hotel, and there was a card game, but because people kept going through and the trains never stopped, that went for something like 30 years, and never stopped. People just kind of deal in and deal out when they had to hop on the train. The town, when we shot there, had, I think, 56 people, and now it has 32, so.
Is the game still going?
No, I'm afraid the game is going. But what was fun was that basically there's no road in Thurmond to get to it from the other side of the river, so you cross. We parked all our big vehicles on one side, walked across, or took some kind of rolling thing that you could push across in the case of the grips across the bridge. And then there was a railroad track, which is what you see in the movie. And the grips loved getting to use those hand cars to move from one side to the other.
Let's do one last question. Anybody got it?
Yeah. Just a comment about the music, which was so perfect and made the mood. And this is the first time I've seen it, but I could not believe how great that music was.
Thank you.
I'd go along with that.
Mason Daring and I, we listened to a bunch of that music, and if you've ever seen Harlan County, USA, Hazel Dickens, who sings in the movie, she's at the funeral and she sings over the thing. Wonderful singer, is from there. When she was singing in the funeral scene, she said, I've done this before. Both of my sisters' husbands died of black lung, and I sang at those funerals. But I said to Mason, okay, listen to all this music, and the only thing I don't want to hear is a banjo, because Flatt and Scruggs, from Bonnie and Clyde, it was just a little too happy. And so there's a lot more dobro in it than banjo. And he got a bunch of really, really good players. And, it's one of those things where it was really, really fun, because it's late in editing when you start getting the music in. And it was really, really fun to get the music and line it up, and then every once in a while recut a little bit to just hit a note or something in the music.
Boy, there is nothing I would rather spend the next 6 hours talking about than the transition from the banjo to the dobro. But we should probably wrap it up. Everybody on stage, I would like to thank you for making one of my favorite movies and for being here tonight.
Thanks, everybody.
Everybody in the audience, thanks so much for being here and participating in the questions.